Howdy everyone, I'm Doug. I want to welcome you to the next Positive Gravity. It's been a little bit since I posted last. I've been busy in the shop cleaning. I did kind of an annual cleaning out here. While the shop was clean, I did some work on refinishing a table. I didn't record any of that, but that's behind me now. I got some new blades for the saw and the table saw. I refinished my worktop here. And for those of you who have eagle eyes, you might notice I put some trim around my window finally, and over in the corner over there was some areas that weren't mudded or finished yet, so I did that. And so I have a nice clean background now, and I cleaned off all my wood, restacked it, so everything's good and good and clean. In addition, let me show you this. Take you over to my other workbench. So this all got painted, cabinets, but this is really cool. So I refinished the worktop over here, and I cleaned off all the junk that was here. This is just a plywood top that's been here for, I don't even know, 20 years. But I sanded it down. And I used alcohol inks, like a black background alcohol ink, and then some yellow and some green. And then I did some paint splatters and some alcohol droplet splattering. And then I finished it with General Finishes Armor Seal Satin. And that went on really nicely. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but that's what I also used on our dining room table refinishing. Goes on really nice, easy to apply, gives a nice finish. So anyway, I thought I'd show you this. Now that I have something cool to look at, I'll try to keep it clean. All right, so let's get into this project. I'm going to be talking about these couple things here. This block is the new project that we're going to be turning, and this gold chunk of resin is the previous time I tried to embed this in resin and failed miserably. I don't know what I did, but the resin just hardened really quickly. It didn't even go into the mold, so it used to just sit on top, and I just cut it off with the saw and set it aside for a while, and then I came back to it to get it to where it is now. But this is a nice piece of resin, and I'll set it aside, and I'll be able to use it for something. So, for now, we're going to set that one aside and just look at the red and black chunk there. So this is the piece that I'm going to actually be working with, and it's got birch mounted on the outside of it there, so I can use that to make a tenon. And I'm going to use the iPad here to just kind of illustrate where I'm trying to go with this piece. So if you allow me the artistic license, I have a little sketch up there of the piece as it is right now. So it's a cylinder of resin with a birch log section epoxied onto it, and I'll be using that as the tenon. So I wanted to kind of show you what's going on inside this piece before we cut it up. When I created it, I put 2 pieces of birch that I cut from one log, split the log in half, and then flipped the live edges to the center. So you can see those curved edges there pointing to the center. Then the resin will work around that. So, the idea is that I'll get a birch top and bottom to the piece, and there'll be a resin, black and red resin center. And so I was thinking about creating a vase, maybe something like this, something a little globe shaped, and maybe with a beaded lip, narrow entrance at the top, and then there'd be resin across the band across the center. So you can see how that kind of comes together. That's the piece as it is now. And then if I remove, do the turning and remove things, you'll end up down to this at the end, hopefully. So we'll see how that goes. But that's the plan for the moment. And first thing I need to do is get this piece onto the lathe, mounted between centers. just like that, and turn that birch plug there into a nice tenon and maybe round up the piece. So I think we're good to go. Why don't we take it over to the lathe and get it spinning. Alright, so I've got the piece mounted up on the lathe between centers. Changing out the tool rest to get a longer tool rest, and using a bowl gouge I'm starting to round up the piece. Mostly it's taking off resin from the outside at the moment. You can see all the little chips and stuff that are flying, and that improves, as you get further into the resin and you can get a clean cut, you start to get ribbons instead of chips. You can see that starting to happen here. I'm using both push cuts and pull cuts, trying to use both sides of my gouge. The resin really kind of takes the sharp edge off the gouge pretty quickly, so I'm trying to use as much of the gouge as I can before I have to sharpen it again, so I don't waste perfectly good gouge. So I have to keep on like this for a while to get it rounded up. You can see that now there's some smoke starting to happen. Occasionally you'll see that right there. That's probably because my tool needs to be sharpened, and so it's going through the resin with more friction than it was before. Still cutting pretty well, but at that point I should probably sharpen. Now I'm marking up the birch plug there that I'm going to turn into a tenon and shoulder. I decided to just leave the block, not shorten the block at all. I'm just cleaning up the tenon there, and that's how I'll attach it to the lathe with the jaws. A couple of points about the tenon: I made it small so that the jaws are almost closed when it's clamping down on it, and that's how you're going to get your most secure attachment. And also make sure you have a clean tenon with nice sharp corners and a proper taper to match up with your 4-jaw chuck, and a nice flat shoulder for the chuck to push against without bottoming out the tenon in the chuck. So those are some key things to look for when you're building your tenons. I did bring up the tailstock. There's, I'm not working on the end of the piece, so that just is some added security. Make it more difficult for it to come off should it decide it wants to. So at this point I'm still using the bowl gouge, and I'm starting to expose the wood, so you can start to see the wood on the top and the bottom, and I'm starting to round off the top corners and the bottom corner. Starting to move towards the shape that I showed you earlier on the iPad. One thing I did notice is the way I showed it to you in the diagram, the curvature of each of the birch pieces was aligned up with each other, so the birch was either very close to each other or very far away. And I had forgotten, when I put this together, I actually rotated the birch so that they were basically 90 degrees to each other. And so rather than having a very narrow and a very wide resin section, I ended up with a more even waving stripe of resin that goes around the piece. And I think you'll see that in a minute here, but because of that, I'm really seriously considering a different design than the one I drew up at the beginning. So I left that in the beginning because it's a good illustration of how you need to be adapting as you start turning the pieces. Sometimes the piece has to speak to you and tell you what it wants to be. And in this case, because of the design, I don't think I'm going to make what I thought I was going to make, but I'm going to make something else really cool. So I haven't at this point decided what it's going to be yet. Just cleaning up the outside and getting a good look at it, and the dimensions that will be available. And so I'm not sure yet. Maybe a vase. But when I get around to that, I will certainly bring you back and show it to you. So this is enough for me for tonight, and you can see how that piece has a more even stripe of resin going through it. So anyway, that's going to change my design. So that's enough for me for tonight, and I will be working some more on this piece, and I will bring you in as soon as I get to that. I got this far with it, and I'm not really sure what shape it's going to take yet. The birch is a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger on the bottom than it is on the top. So I need to figure out what I'm going to turn this into. Probably something a little different than what I was originally planning, because of the height difference between here and here. I really need to use this whole piece. So I got to think about that and come up with a new plan. So that's where I'm at with this. I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and the light bulb will go off when I know what it's going to be. Currently thinking kind of a more upright vase, more of a cylindrical kind of shape. So I don't know. Gotta think about it before I put the blade to the wood. So let's do it, and we'll find out how it goes. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to always enjoy the process. Sometimes that's all there is. Alright, so at this point I've kind of decided on the shape. It's going to be kind of an egg shape. I need to establish the foot on this end so I can determine the right curvature for this. So I need to set up the foot so I know kind of what that's going to look like. And then the top's going to taper down. This resin that's left up here will be gone. And there'll be a small bead around the small opening in the top here. I'll do that with a Forstner bit in a little bit, but I want to work on the outside here a little bit more. So let's start by establishing the foot so I know how to set up the rest of this curvature.
Alright, that looks good. So now I just need to get this curve. I think I'll make it just a little bit narrower at the top than I do at the bottom. Almost the shape that it is now. Maybe it's actually pretty close, so.
just rinsed this with denatured alcohol. Get rid of the sanding dust. And give us our first look at kind of what it's going to look like. Actually, it was odorless mineral spirits that I used. Not denatured alcohol. I'm going to give that a spin. Make sure this is dry. Now with a clean towel, what I have is General Finish's Armor Seal Semi-Gloss. I haven't used this on a piece before, but thought I'd give it a try. I used satin on the top of my workbench and on our dining room table in satin. So I thought I'd give this a try. Just going to dab my paper towel in. One pass. So this needs to cure for 12 hours between coats. I think that's going to look nice. So I'm going to let that go till tomorrow. I don't want to do any more turning with this on the outside, so I think we're done here for tonight. Alright, howdy everyone. We're back for another day of work on this piece. So far I've got 2 coats of the General Finishes semi-gloss armor coat on the outside. I did a light sanding between the two. I'm going to leave it there for now. I'll probably go for a 3rd coat, but I think now I'm going to start working on the inside. Get that up to the same level as the outside, and then I'll put a finish coat on all of it. But yeah, so far so good. So let's get turning on the inside. So I got this project this far. It's hollowed out. Still a little wavy inside there, but I got a little more work to do there. In the process of hollowing out, I damaged the lip here, so I had to take that off. And I think what I'm going to do is actually take it down a little bit more, so there's some surface area right there that's flat. And then attach some, this is probably walnut, and just put a little beaded rim there made of walnut. That's my plan.